They do not realize that in actual fact, what they thought was bloating was actually an ovarian cyst. Hello, Dr. Joe here of the drjoe.com and the 2020from.com. In today's video, I'm going to give you some tips on how you can deal with bloating. You know, abdominal bloating that makes you feel very uncomfortable. I'm going to give you some very nice tips that will help you deal with this problem. Now, bloating is actually a huge subject. There are foods that cause bloating and there are foods that relieve bloating. But I'm not going to deal with all of those today because the video will be extra long. In today's video, I'm just going to give you some generic tips on how to deal with bloating. The other two areas I'll cover in separate videos. So let's get started. So, by the way, the first tips I'm going to give to you here have to do with eating technique, because the way you eat can contribute to whether you bloat or not. Okay, so there are lots of tips that I'm going to give to you, but the initial tips have to do with eating technique. So let's get started. So the first tip I've said here is talk less when eating. Okay, you need to talk less when you're eating, because when you talk and eat at the same time, you're going to swallow air, and that will lead to bloating. Okay, so that's tip number one. Next tip: chew with your mouth closed. Okay, because when you chew with your mouth open, you're going to swallow air inevitably, and that will lead to bloating. Let's move on to the next tip. Do not rush your food. Okay, now my own daughter is very guilty of this. She's always very keen to finish her food very quickly, and I used to say, well, why are you rushing your food? Take your time, enjoy your meal. Okay, there's no rush. Just take your time, eat slowly, because when you rush your food, you're more likely to swallow air, and that will lead to bloating. So that's one tip there for you. Next tip is to limit your food portions. Okay, now if you've got problems with bloating, when you have a heavy meal, all of that meal is going to stretch the stomach, and that's going to make you feel very uncomfortable. Okay, that stomach distension will lead to abdominal distension. That in itself will make you feel very uncomfortable. So what I suggest to people who have problems with bloating, I say, have frequent small feeds. Okay, spread throughout the day. That helps a lot instead of having one huge meal. Let's move on. Next tip is avoid chewing gums. Okay, avoid chewing gums, because when you chew gums, you're going to chew it for a fairly long time, and that means you're going to swallow plenty of air, and all of that air is going to be trapped in your gut, and that's going to cause abdominal distension, and that will make you feel bloated. So instead of having chewing gums, just have peppermint to freshen your breath. That should be fine. So let's move on. What I've said here, dump fizzy drinks. Okay, because fizzy drinks are carbonated. All of that compressed carbon dioxide in the fizzy drinks, when you drink it, it's going to get released, and all of that gas is going to be trapped in your GI tract, and that's going to lead to bloating. So fizzy drinks are a no-no if you've got a problem with bloating. Okay, now along with that, I've said here, by the way, no straw drinking, because they tend to go together, straw drinking and fizzy drinks. When you drink using the straw, if you've got problems with bloating, you're going to swallow some air, and that will be a problem for you. So let's move on. No eating too much sugar and salt. Okay, you want to avoid eating too much sugar and salt. Why is that? Well, some of that sugar is going to get fermented, and that will lead to release of gas, which will lead to bloating. As for the salt, that has to do with the dynamics of the way salt moves around the body, in the sense that where you have salt, water will follow. So salt will lead to water retention, which will lead to bloating. And I see this a lot with women, especially around that time of the month. So you want to limit how much salt and sugar you consume. You should be doing that anyway in terms of healthy lifestyle. So this is not an unusual advice for you if you've got a problem with bloating. So let's move on. Next is, I've said here, you want to avoid eating excess amounts of fatty foods. Okay, you want to avoid doing that, because fatty foods, they move along the GI tract very slowly, and when you have a huge amount of that, all of that heavy meal, just traveling, taking its time slowly through the gut, that's going to make you feel bloated. So you want to limit how much fatty foods you consume in one fell swoop. So let's move on. Now, this next tip has to do with food intolerance. So like I've said here, you want to look out for food intolerance. And by that, I'm referring to wheat, dairy, and gluten, okay? So you want to keep a food diary and go through a process of elimination, okay? This works a treat. The idea behind this is you keep a food diary, you want to find or rather identify the offending foods, and then you eliminate them and see if that relieves your bloating, okay? If you eliminate a particular food and your bloating problem is relieved, then you know that food is an offending food. So it's a very nice tip. It works a treat. It's very simple. It's something anybody can do. It does take time. I've got to admit, it does take time. So let's move on. I told you I got some more tips here for you. So next tip I've put on here. I've said constipation needs to be resolved. Now, when you're constipated, obviously you got a lot of food that is taking its time, stuck in the gut. That's just going to make you feel distended. It's going to make you feel bloated. So if you've got constipation issues, then that needs to be dealt with. I'm going to do a separate video on constipation at some point, okay? Constipation does lead to bloating. There's no doubt about that. So that's an issue that needs to be resolved on its own. Okay, let's move on. Next tip. I've said here, walking does help your gut movement. Now, it's not just walking only, actually. Physical exercise. Being sedentary does lead to bloating because your gut is not going to move as it should. Okay, the transit time is going to be a lot longer if you're very sedentary. So what you want to do is engage in physical exercise. Walking does help. Walking is a very simple exercise that anybody can do. And I will encourage you to do that, to walk if you've got a problem with bloating. Because when you walk, when you do any form of exercise, that will help improve the gut transit time. Okay, so very nice tip. That's connected to the constipation actually. Next tip, this has to do with supplements. So I've said here, use simethicone capsules, okay? Now, they do work, simethicone capsules. Try them out and see how you get on. I'll probably leave some links below if you want to get some for yourself. Along with simethicone capsules, you can also use peppermint capsules. They also help a lot with bloating, okay? So that's one there for you in terms of supplements, simethicone and peppermint. Next, I've said here, increase your fiber intake gradually. Now, if you're somebody who's been on low fiber diet, well, you want to improve your fiber intake gradually, because if you go all gung-ho, you might run into difficulties. So what I usually advise is just a gradual increase in your fiber intake, because your gut needs to get used to getting some fiber when previously it was getting very little fiber. Ideally, we need about 30 grams of fiber per day. But for you who's been on a low fiber diet, if you want to increase your fiber intake, you've got to do it gradually. Don't just jump off to the 30 grams a day all of a sudden, because it might become counterproductive. Okay? So let's move on. Now, this next tip here is because I'm a medical doctor, so I've got to include this, okay? What I've said here, make sure you're not dealing with a medical condition, okay? So things like celiac, Crohn's disease, irritable bowel syndrome, and ovarian cysts, okay? For the celiac, the Crohn's, and the IBS, there will be other symptoms that will lead your doctor in that direction to make a diagnosis. As far as the ovarian cyst is concerned, this one can creep in on you, ladies. I see this in the gynae clinic where ladies think they're having a problem with bloating and they're trying all sorts of things. And they do not realize that in actual fact, what they thought was bloating was actually an ovarian cyst about the size of a watermelon. So, if you've tried one or two techniques and it's not working, see your doctor to make sure that we're not dealing with a medical condition. So, as promised, I said I was going to give you a lot of tips, and I have done that. Hopefully, the tips I've given you here are tips that should help you move things along, and that will include moving the gas along as well. So hopefully you got some value from this video. If you did, please give the video a thumbs up, please like the video, and also please share this video with your friends, family and colleagues. Now, if you got any comments, any questions regarding the things that I've discussed in this video, I've discussed quite a lot of things. Go ahead, leave your comments down below. The other videos will be forthcoming sometime in future. Be on the lookout for them. I think that's it. Until next time, this is Dr. Joe signing out.